What I've been phrasing it as is I've actually been calling it after the business, kind of because heart of the tree to me means more than just the business aspect of it. It kind of just means me interacting with the world in the way that seems most like myself. So what I was thinking of calling the project was something like The Heart of the Tree, a right brain contemplation of healing, culture, and the universe. And it's partially because life, the universe, and everything was already taken. But it sounds like it's just ridiculously broad. But the reality is that it's all kind of stuff I've been thinking for the last, 30 years or so, and maybe haven't had the opportunity to get out. And it helps for me to think of myself as a particularly as a right brain thinker, because in my family people always tend to think of people like Richard Feynman, my uncle, as a left brain thinker, but it isn't true. I mean, it has always been the combination of the right and the left brain, and that is really true for me as well. And for me, when I think about the right brain, it has a lot to do with synthesis, of pulling things together from different areas and sort of smushing them all together and seeing how they work, and seeing kind of what cool stuff comes out of that. And that's actually one of the things I've always loved to do. And the more I've thought about how I interact with the world, the more I'm doing that with my healing and my background and all the books I've read and all the thoughts I've thought is all sort of that same process of synthesizing stuff and pulling it together and throwing it around and seeing how it works. And I actually developed an event several years ago called the Carnival of Fools, and that was specifically about that particular process. And it's almost like at that time I was thinking of creating this kind of this space where all of these fusion of ideas could come together and something creative could happen as a result of it. And I was thinking of it as an art piece with community as my medium, as sort of like a found art piece. And so this project, the Heart of the Tree project, is sort of the same way. It's realizing that if you take a piece from over here and a piece from over here, you might not necessarily know how they connect, but if you bring all of those pieces together, you can get some sort of structure which has meaning to people, or has kind of a way of interacting with them that is a little bit more than the pieces that you begin with. And so it's almost like I think of this whole project as an art piece using ideas, because I was maybe I'll go into that a little bit later, but when I've had to think overall about what my ideas have in common, I can't even necessarily get to a specific, it's all about primal connection, which is a phrase that's come up recently. It's like, oh yeah, that has a lot to do with things. But it isn't necessarily all about primal connection, but that's just one of the features which is really important. So when I thought about actually writing a book, it was just like, ooh, that's going to be awfully linear. I am a specialist in non-linear things. And I really am. I mean, my whole life I've pulled things together. I have jumped from one spot to another, which in ways that have always made sense to me, but don't necessarily always make sense to other people. I spent a long time in the 1980s and early 90s studying dynamic systems theory, and that still sort of influences a great deal about how I think about the universe and the world. So any project that I undertake that is really me is going to have this kind of nonlinear aspect to it. So when people think about a book, they tend to think about something that, has a narrative and it goes from one place to another. This is more of a sculpture. And it's also, I think, I'm going to move a little bit into the idea of an idea space. This is a little bit like if you spend as much time as I have talking to mathematicians, they will talk about sort of mathematical spaces where you know, most of us tend to think of things as having 3 dimensions and maybe add time, but that is not really something that a mathematician will think about when they think about space. Space can have, you know, a large number of dimensions. It can have infinite dimensions. It can have a finite large number of dimensions. It can have some number that's more than 0 number of dimensions. And you can still talk about it as something that has reality and meaning and behavior. And then, you know, sort of another way of thinking about space is like the way that psychologists think about space, which is that if you measure something, some particular, you know, if you measure people's height or you measure the color of something, some particular factor, people and objects will differ, and they can differ on more than 3. And that's another way of thinking of dimension. So when I think about an idea space, I think about sort of almost like a multi-dimensional kind of thing, you know, an object that, you know, one of the ideas might be this idea of, you know, primal connection, or another idea might be holding the space, or another idea might be, you know, connecting with the self, or all of these different things that sort of influence what you're trying to say, but they don't necessarily all work together in a linear way. And so, you know, when I think about a manuscript, it's actually just one aspect of that idea space of who I've been, this kind of underlying sculpture of thought. So that's one of the things that I want to bring to it, is it really is an art piece. It's not going to be, it's not philosophy, it's not theoretical physics, it's not any of these other things, but that's the closest I can come to really describing, you know, kind of the experience that I want people to have from it.